The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that feels alive, as if every breath, every heartbeat was waiting for one person to speak. Cameras rolled, the audience leaned forward, and at the center of it all stood a man who had fooled everyone. His name was Ryan Blake. He wore confidence like a costume. Dark blue suit, polished shoes, an expensive tie that shimmered under the studio lights. To anyone watching, he looked like a real lawyer. Even his tone carried that rhythm of practiced authority. He straightened his tie, cleared his throat, and said, "Your Honor, my client is innocent." His voice was calm, controlled, convincing. Judge Judy's eyes, sharp as ever, tracked him closely. For years, she'd seen hundreds of cases, liars, manipulators, people who thought they could outsmart her. But this one felt different. There was something in his composure that seemed too perfect, almost rehearsed. The bailiff stepped forward with a folder. Inside it, a document that would shatter the illusion in seconds. Judy took it, scanned the first few lines, and her eyes froze. She didn't move. The camera zoomed in on her expression, curiosity folding into disbelief, then quiet anger. "Mr. Blake," she said slowly, her tone razor-sharp, "where did you say you went to law school?" The question hit like a gavel strike. Ryan blinked once. His smile faltered. You could see the color drain from his face. Harvard, Your Honor." Her eyebrow arched. "Harvard, she repeated, the sarcasm thick enough to cut through the air. "And when exactly did you graduate?" The audience whispered. The cameras stayed fixed on Ryan's face, every twitch, every bead of sweat forming at his temple. He tried to hold his ground. 2014, he said, voice slightly cracking. "Top of my class." Judge Judy leaned forward, the document still in her hand. "That's interesting," she said softly, "because according to this, Harvard Law has no record of a Ryan Blake ever attending, much less graduating." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. His hand dropped to his side. His throat tightened. The confident air that had carried him through the morning suddenly vanished, leaving behind only fear. "Your Honor, there must be some mistake," he stammered. Judy didn't blink. "Oh, I don't make mistakes," she replied, each word a cold truth. "Not when it comes to people standing in my courtroom pretending to be something they're not." Every eye turned to him. The woman sitting behind him whispered something to the person next to her. Someone in the back row covered their mouth. The tension was unbearable. Ryan shifted, desperate to find words, but nothing came out. His mouth opened, then closed. Finally, he managed to say, "I was only trying to help," but Judy cut him off. "Save it," she snapped. "You don't get to use my courtroom as your stage. This is not a performance, Mr. Blake. This is real life." The moment was electric. The sound of paper shuffling, the creak of a chair, the faint hum of the cameras. Everything seemed louder now. Judge Judy turned to her clerk. "Call for verification with the Bar Association," she ordered, her tone controlled, but firm. Then back to Ryan. "Until then, you don't move. You don't speak. You don't breathe unless I say so." The young man stood frozen, his fake confidence melting away. For the audience at home, this was no ordinary episode. This was a reckoning, a courtroom hero revealed as a fraud right before their eyes. But beneath the humiliation and shock, something else flickered: pity. Because everyone watching could sense it. This wasn't just a con. It was a cry for recognition. Judge Judy looked straight into his trembling eyes and said, "You picked the wrong courtroom to play pretend in." And with that single line, the internet was hooked. Before the courtroom lights and cameras, before the lie that made headlines, there was just a boy named Ryan Blake, a kid from a forgotten street on the east side of Newark. He lived with his mother in a small apartment that smelled of lemon soap and late-night coffee. She was a single parent, tough and proud, who worked 2 jobs at a diner and a dry cleaner. Every evening she would collapse into the couch beside him, switch on Judge Judy, and whisper, "Son, one day you'll stand before a judge. Just make sure it's for the right reason." Those words never left him. Ryan loved how Judy commanded a room, the way she dissected lies, the way she made grown men tremble and then smile in the same breath. It was power, but it was honest power. He'd sit there wide-eyed, studying her voice, her rhythm, the calm that always came before her storm. In those moments, he didn't just see a TV show, he saw a calling. By the time he was 16, Ryan was devouring old case files he found online, studying arguments like other kids studied sports stats. He was smart, frighteningly smart. Teachers said he had a lawyer's brain trapped in a poor kid's body. He got a partial scholarship to college, but life, as always, had other plans. When his mother got sick, everything stopped. He dropped out halfway through his second year to take care of her. The hospital bills ate through their savings, and when she passed, he was left with nothing. No degree, no safety net, just a cracked photograph of her smiling at his high school graduation. That night, he sat in the dark, holding the photo, whispering, "I'll make you proud, I swear." He found work at a small law firm downtown, not as a lawyer, not even as an assistant, but as a file clerk. His job was simple: organize, copy, and carry. But Ryan wasn't built to just file papers. Every night after the office closed, he'd stay behind, reading case briefs, court transcripts, and watching trial recordings on the firm's server. He learned the language of law by heart, the posture, the tone, the structure of arguments. He started imitating the attorneys, not mockingly, but almost reverently. He practiced in the mirror, adjusting his voice to sound confident, rehearsing openings and closings to imaginary juries. It became an obsession, a hunger to become someone his mother would have recognized. And then came that day. It was a Monday morning, gray and chaotic. One of the firm's junior attorneys had forgotten about a small civil hearing. He was out sick, the client was waiting, and panic filled the air. Ryan, sitting quietly in the corner, watched the chaos unfold. Then something inside him clicked. He grabbed the folder, straightened his tie, and walked toward the courthouse 3 blocks away. No one stopped him. No one even noticed. He entered the courtroom, heart pounding so hard he thought the judge could hear it. He introduced himself confidently, Ryan Blake, counsel for the defense. Somehow, through sheer instinct, observation, and desperation, Ryan argued the case flawlessly. Every phrase he had ever overheard from real lawyers came pouring out like second nature. When he finished, the judge ruled in his client's favor. Case closed. The man he represented shook his hand in gratitude. He said, "You're a hell of a lawyer." That moment changed everything. When he returned to the office, nobody asked questions. The files were back in place, and life moved on. But Ryan's heart didn't. It burned with something new: pride and temptation. He began taking more chances. When poor clients came in seeking help, he'd consult them unofficially. He gave advice that worked. People started referring others to him. "Go to Ryan. He's sharp. He cares." He didn't charge much, sometimes nothing at all. He told himself he was helping the people who couldn't afford justice. But deep down, he knew it wasn't about justice anymore. It was about identity, about being seen. Each lie made him feel more legitimate. Each victory made him forget he wasn't supposed to be there. The line between pretending and becoming blurred, then vanished. And as the months turned into years, the boy who once sat beside his mother watching Judge Judy had transformed into a man who now stood where only the real ones were meant to stand. Ryan Blake wasn't just pretending anymore. He believed the lie, because, in his mind, he'd earned it. By the time a year had passed, Ryan had become something of a legend. Clips of his fiery courtroom exchanges spread like wildfire online. He defended small business owners, struggling tenants, and single mothers, earning the title The People's Lawyer. One video changed everything. His closing words, "Justice doesn't wear a price tag," went viral. Within days, talk shows invited him. Local reporters praised his brilliance. Even Judge Judy's producers took notice. They called and said, "We love your energy." The public...
Months later, on a warm spring morning, he walked into a real courtroom for the first time as an officially licensed attorney. His suit was modest now, his steps slower, more deliberate. There were no cameras, no flashing lights, just the faint buzz of fluorescent bulbs and the hum of quiet conversations. But when he placed his briefcase on the desk and looked up at the bench, his breath caught. Judge Judy was presiding. She didn't flinch when she saw him. No smile, no nod, just a faint glimmer of recognition in her eyes. "Mr. Blake," she said evenly, "you're representing the defendant today?" "Yes, Your Honor," he replied, his voice steady. The case was small, a landlord-tenant dispute, but for Ryan, it might as well have been the Supreme Court. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who once faked being a lawyer was now standing in front of the same judge, this time for real. The opposing counsel was sharp, a middle-aged attorney named Paul Henderson. As soon as Ryan heard the name, his chest tightened. Henderson, the same man he had impersonated years ago when he first stepped into a courtroom pretending to be someone he wasn't. He hadn't forgotten, and now here he was, facing him for real. When the session began, Henderson leaned back in his chair, his smirk subtle but deliberate. "Didn't think I'd ever see you here legally, Blake," he whispered. Ryan didn't answer. He simply opened his file, heart pounding, but posture calm. He'd made his mistakes, and this was his moment to prove he'd learned from them. Judge Judy watched closely, but this time her gaze wasn't skeptical. It was observant, almost protective, as if she were silently asking, "Show me who you've become." Ryan began his argument. His tone wasn't theatrical or arrogant anymore. It was measured, precise, and humble. He didn't rush. He didn't charm. He built his case brick by brick, relying on facts, fairness, and empathy. And something extraordinary happened. Halfway through, the courtroom grew still. Even Henderson leaned forward, eyes narrowing, not in mockery, but in respect. When Ryan finished, he looked up and said softly, "Your Honor, I once stood in this courtroom pretending to serve justice. Today I stand here trying to deserve it." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Judge Judy leaned back in her chair and said, "Mr. Blake, I've heard a lot of closing arguments in my career, but that might be one of the few I'll remember." The verdict went in Ryan's favor, not because of pity, not because of history, but because he was right. After the hearing, as the courtroom emptied, Henderson approached him. "You're still a better lawyer than half the ones with degrees," he said quietly. Then, almost reluctantly, he extended his hand. "This time, it's official." He shook it. The gesture felt heavier than any applause. Outside, the sun hit the courthouse steps just right. He paused there for a moment, closing his eyes for a moment. No cameras, no crowd, just peace. Behind one of the upstairs windows, Judge Judy was watching. Her assistant asked, "Do you think he'll make it?" She didn't look away. "He already has," she said simply, then turned back to her papers. That evening, social media exploded again. Photos of Ryan walking out of the courthouse trended worldwide, but this time, the caption was different. It didn't say, "Fake lawyer exposed." It said, "He earned it." And for the first time in his life, Ryan Blake didn't need to act like someone important. He simply was.